Okay, that everything is going according. Okay, all right. Just some housekeeping tips. I know people have asked me about the webinar. It is one CEU credit for dietary managers and dietitians and chefs. Their certificate of participation and the recording in the PowerPoint slideshow will be in a PDF format, and it will be able to be downloaded next Wednesday for you to use or show your teams. For some of you, you are showing this webinar in a group format. So if you have any questions, please submit them on the bottom, and we will answer all questions at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions throughout, you do not have to wait till the end. Just type them in, and we will answer them at the end. Okay. So again, thank you for joining us this afternoon for the All You Serve Educational Webinar Series. And I think we will get started. So today we're going to talk about sensory patient dining. And we are very blessed and fortunate to have Dan Henroy, Director of Nutrition and Food Services from UCSF Medical Center, and Atul Wan, Executive Chef, Culinary Nutrition Services from St. Peter's University Hospital, New Brunswick. So let me start off by telling a little bit about Dan. Dan is the Director of the Department of Nutrition and Food Service at the University of California, San Francisco Health System, where he is responsible for patient meal services at 2 hospitals totaling 716 beds, 7 retail food operations, catering and conference services, 3 gift shops, and oversight of inpatient and outpatient nutrition services. He has overseen the creation and renovation of all retail food outlets and implemented new retail programs for cashless payment, mobile ordering, healthy food branding, and nutritional information on point-of-sales receipts and digital signage. He has also implemented on-demand room service, and he is responsible with overseeing a robot fleet in addition to all his other responsibilities with Health Systems Sustainable. So thank you, Dan, for being here today. And wanted to tell you a little bit about Atul. And Atul has, first of all, Atul is, he was on Chopped. He's worked with contractors, self-op. He has been an executive chef for many healthcare systems, and he's owned and operated many of his own retail restaurants. He's all about the food, and he's all about the experience with presentation. So again, thank you for joining us today for Sensory Patient Dining. So today's takeaways is going to be identifying the satisfiers of meal presentation, being able to adopt 3 sensory strategies to implement today, and you're going to learn how to elevate your meal assembly or meal delivery to increase that positive meal service experience. Today we're talking about the senses, sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell to give you that elevated experience. Okay. Okay, Atul, all yours.
Thank you, Marcia, for that great introduction. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So let's hit the ground running. Why are you here today? Why are you on this call today, on this webinar? Just a quick breakdown, root cause analysis for why we are all here. Continued patient experience improvement, which will impact HCAHPS, Press Ganey, and not just HCAHPS and Press Ganey, which actually drive reimbursement and all the good stuff that administrators look for, but also social media ratings. I mean, we all look at restaurant social media ratings before we go out, or we post pictures or stuff like that, but people are looking at what is our hospital rating on Facebook, on Google, even on LinkedIn for employees. So it's all relevant. And finally, more and more operators and administrators are asking for this restaurant experience. Our vice presidents and presidents are saying, well, we want the restaurant experience for our guests, and they are coming to us, chefs and directors, to find a solution to that situation. Marsha, I want to switch.
Just hit enter. Hit enter. You should be able to be fine.
Not happening.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm a graduate of the Culinary Institute, and we were drilled in on a couple of key concepts when we talked about food from the basic skills class. Aroma, flavor, and taste. Those are the key things that were drilled into us, in addition to presentation and cooking technique. Next slide. So of all these aspects, and today we're talking about sensory dining, let's start with the visual experience, the presentation piece of it. Is your plate Instagram worthy? Everybody knows Instagram. I'm sure you have been on Instagram, even if you don't have an account. And if you have not been on Instagram, I wholeheartedly encourage you, you need to get onto Instagram. Somebody's Instagram, just type in a keyword you want, anything, ingredient, word, concept, thought, and press enter and see what comes up. It's very interesting what Instagram is doing from a visual perspective. And for us chefs, Instagram is a mainstay for ideas. So if people are looking at Instagram today and you look at some very amazing looking food, think about it. Is the plate that you've presented in your food service operation, in your healthcare operation, is it just dumped on the plate or is it positioned properly? Now, when we plate, we enhance the visual impact of the plating by different aspects. Color is the first, shape, and style. So let's talk about color. Next page. If you look at this plate that I've shown over here, I think it's pretty attractive. There's a lot of different colors, but if you go back, what has been the trend in healthcare? Most of our food is beige, brown, green, red, and to some point, it is now boring. So let's break up the colors. Let's get into some yellows and maroons and purples. Let's enhance the color. Let's take a look at this picture over here. The brown has been seared dark brown. The orange pops out. The yellow is a bright yellow. The green is a bright pastel green. And there's a hint of red there. There's a white background for the plate, a plain canvas. You've put all these colors together, and then I broke that whole plate with a speck of white right in the middle. That became the focal point. Let's also make the food glisten. When I say glisten, what I mean is your food fresh? Does it have that moist look on it? When you serve a piece of chicken, does it look moist or does it look dry and drab? Finally, keep it natural. Let's face the reality. Blue-colored food is not natural. Yes, some of the seafood, some fish have blue color skins, but when you cook it, it turns brown or dark black or something of that sort. It doesn't stay blue. I think we'll leave blue to cupcakes. Next. Shapes. Shapes and cuts of food. Shapes, once you get over color, shapes help break the visual aspect to the eye, and it helps you retain the customer's attention on what is being served. Again, in this plate here, you have a cherry tomato cut in half. So it could be a sphere, like a cherry tomato, or a tomato. You cut it in half, hemisphere. You have a confetti, the couscous. You have leaves. You have avocado and chicken cut into strips and slices. So all different sorts of shapes are being used on different plates. Let me throw another aspect to it, texture. If you add a crunch to it, the customer automatically knows, hey, I got some nuts on this, or I got some tortilla chips, or I got some crunchy stuff, and that resounds with the brain where they can identify there's going to be a crunch factor to this. The next one is plating style. We did another presentation with Marsha Diamond and Ali Serve some time back, and we talked mainly about the visual aspect of plating of healthcare food. And this is just a crash course of that entire presentation, the Y style of plating. Very simple. It's used everywhere, hotels, restaurants, hospitals, at home. Starch, top left, vegetables top right, protein right in the middle, and then a sauce where it is 6 o'clock. So I call this the Y style of plating. It's not going to go away. Yes, some people find it boring. No big deal. It's easily coachable. You can train your staff easy on it instead of them just slopping stuff on a plate at their own whim and just dropping the sauce on top. So that's what helps with this whole Y style of plating. The next one is modern plating. If you don't have to get into modern plating, going back, but if you look at this plate in the bottom of my slide here, this is how chefs are plating in restaurants today. I don't know if you want to call it Michelin star style plating, but if you Google it, you will find pictures like this. This picture I have taken from the internet. So what's happening over this in this whole concept of modern style plating? What's going on in the restaurants out there? That is that restaurant experience that our administrators want us to bring to our food service. And for that, my few tips that I'm going to give you is form lines. Take your ingredients and form a flow. Use different colored ingredients. Again, same thing, cuts, colors, and flow. And then finally, find a focal point. In this plate, it's a little egg yolk that is the focal point. Next slide. So moving to the next sense, we're going to talk about the olfactory sense or aroma. How do you create that, wow, it smells great? Spices, herbs, and techniques. Next. So the first one we're going to hit on is spices and herbs. And I think spices and herbs are the key smell enhancers. Add some good quality ingredients and you got a winning dish. Something as simple as herbaceous, grassy smell of freshly cut, clean, crisp lettuce. Throw on a lemon wedge that the guest may have with that lettuce. And the volatile citric oils that are released from that lemon wedge, think of that whole combination of grassiness, freshness, a little citric scent in the air. I mean, try to visualize it. Think of that impact on your guest in a hospital room or in your senior care room. Or take some ethnic foods. Now, we send all our food I work in a hospital, so we send up our food covered by a dome. It's on a plate. But in ethnic foods, with all these spices that we use, you may have some cumin, paprika, garlic, onions, cilantro, caraway, nutmeg, cinnamon, all these bright, bold spices. You don't have to go overboard with them. Just a hint of it. You can have, let's talk about fresh salsa, pulverized tomato, or guacamole, fresh crushed avocado. Again, add some acid to it, mix it all up, put that on a plate, and present it to the guest. Open the dome, open the cover of the plate in front of the guest. Look at that eye glow. I have seen it time and time again at restaurants. I've seen it at hotels. I've seen it in the hospitals when you put a nice plate in front of the guest and you open that dome and he's like, wow, this smells really great. If you've done action stations in your cafeterias, again, the sense of smell travels first throughout the entire building before the food talks itself. And then, next slide. Next, thank you. Cooking techniques. Cooking techniques are also very important in helping smell because when you sear or roast or grill, they add that aromatic aspect to the food. Next. Next. Thank you. Flavor and taste. Again, in CIA, we are drilled with flavor and taste, flavor and taste, flavor and taste. What impacts flavor and taste? Flavor and taste is the cornerstone of all culinary experiences, the epitome of sensory dining. This signifies the deliciousness that you find on Yelp, on all social media, on Facebook, when people post about food. Research has shown that if service is good, food looks good, and smells good, it automatically tastes good. But as chefs, as culinarians, as food service professionals, it is also our responsibility to make sure that we put in our 100% so that the flavor and taste is top notch. For flavor and taste, use quality ingredients, follow tested recipes, and taste the food before serving. Flavor and taste is also impacted significantly by skill and education of your team. Next slide. So when we go to ingredients, use the best possible ingredient that you can. And I'm not saying you need to buy a really expensive produce, versus a slightly cheaper one. Whatever is ideal for you, go for that. But use a right quality ingredient for your operation. Then use a tested recipe. There are so many recipes out there. Some of them are not tested. Use your peers. Use forums like this to get tested recipes. And finally, taste the food. Next. Technique. We talked about technique when it came to aroma. Technique as in the style of cooking. You're roasting, you're grilling, you're sauteing, you're steaming, you're poaching. There are so many different ways you can cook food. Now there's sous vide, which is huge. Get the technique right. Again, part of the recipe. Train your staff, train yourself on the right technique of cooking. And I'm going to take this to the next level. If you have a skilled team, throw in the novelty aspect. Ask your team, ask your chef to use fermented foods like kombucha, kimchi. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm sure you've seen it. You might not find it in every grocery store, but go to the Whole Foods, Publix, all those kind of stores, they carry this stuff. Use different aspects like popping. What is popping? You get these pop rock, almost like a pop rock candy, but you get them pop rock flowers. These are micro flowers. You take a tiny bit of it and you put it in a salad. You put the salad in your mouth and it almost bursts in your mouth. It's like a little tiny pop. These are little exciting things that break the whole experience of dining. Another aspect of improving your whole culinary aspect, sous vide. Sous vide is so big right now in the restaurant world, and big quick service chain operations have always used sous vide, but I'm working on using it in healthcare. Sous vide helps maintain the integrity of the ingredient, and it also helps take your food far. Next, please. And finally, hopefully, all of these training, the correct use of ingredient, of technique, color, cuts, and knowledge are going to land up on our meal. This is an example of a tray that we served in our operation. And I can tell you one thing, this tray, the picture here does not do as much justice as you would if you see the tray actually. I'm not the best photographer, but I want to kind of talk briefly about this tray, and I'm sure Dan is going to spend some time more on that, is the flow of ingredients or of items that are placed in the tray. Have a set layout. Where does your plate go? Where does your dessert go? Where does your napkin and your cutlery go? Where is your hot beverage? Where is your cold beverage? Where are your condiments? Everything should have a space for it. And that's when it helps you keep organized. It helps your team keep organized. It helps the guest finally understand how his hands are going to move, especially with patients. Their motion might be limited. You want to make it easy for them. And you want to make it easy for our nursing staff if they have to help the patients. To hone in on this plate, this is a quesadilla. We have it on our patient services menu. And if you notice, it's not just piled up in any form. There is a curve. It's a flow. There's a line to it. We've cut into triangles. And then we've broken that whole plate with a purple orchid. Now, this is an edible orchid. People think it's a keepsake. You take it home. People do take it home. But I tell you, eat it. 0 calories. It's almost like eating air. There's nothing to it. But it breaks up the plate instead of using the usual parsley. Since I'm talking about parsley and orchids, I just want to focus a little bit also, or talk a little bit about garnishes. What do you use in your operation for garnish? It's a very important factor. The way I've described it to my cooks is makeup. Makeup accentuates the look of a person, of an actor, of anybody. You're going to a party, you're making up, you're dressing up. That is garnish. be it chopped parsley, be it some chopped tomatoes, be it a purple color flower. Nowadays, if you research your produce vendor, you get flowers coming out of everywhere, different colors, edible flowers. Marigold is my other favorite, orange and yellow, bright orange and yellow. It breaks up the plate beautifully. It has a lasting shelf life, and each flower gives you a lot of petals. You can just sprinkle it on a plate. It breaks it up. There is no calorie aspect to it. There's no sodium to it. There's nothing to it. So why not go all out? Finally, I hope all these insights will help you get happier guests, better satisfaction scores, reduced waste, a happier team with efficiency, and probably a happier boss. But in closing, I want to add one word that I hope you can take away, and that is passion. That's what I live by. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see there's some questions that came up, and we will answer those at the end.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your time being here. I'm Dan Henley, I'm the Director of Nutrition and Food Services for the University of California San Francisco Health System. And what I wanted to talk about today dovetails off of what Atul was. So you have passionate chefs who are trained culinarians who are putting so much thought and passion in themselves into these dishes. But then if there is not execution on the plating side, and again, that's that very first impression on sort of eating with your eyes, you've sort of wasted all of that time, effort, and passion. And we certainly don't want to do that to our colleagues. So next slide. So what I wanted to talk about today was showing sort of an abbreviated version of a training program that we came up with called Playing with Pride. You can see in the graphic that we're in San Francisco. We have a couple of different sites across there, and we rolled out this program to our multiple hospital sites and had teams across those sites working on it. So you see the word pride is capitalized. That's actually our values for our health system: professionalism, respect, integrity, diversity, and excellence. So we try to really reinforce, even just in the name of what we're trying to do. And the whole idea is coming up with standards. And I know you've probably heard people talk about that, maybe that on other webinars to do it, but I haven't really seen anyone who's sort of shared in a lot of detail what their standards are, because we can come up with what our menus are, but then the patient gets to decide to order. And I should say that we are an on-demand dining hotel-style room service program, so our concept of a meal may not actually be what the patient is ordering. Next slide. So I think, we believe, and this is coming straight out of our training, what the food looks like tells the patient a lot about the food. Again, we just hate to see that effort go to waste. So the thought and care and taste, the color, shape, size, smell, all of that contributes to that patient's perception, of the food. And I would challenge you to think about what's that very first impression, what's the first meal the patient is eating with you, and what does that food look like? Because you don't get that on a tray ticket or a kitchen ticket. You don't know that's the first meal. So you have to treat every meal like it's a first meal. Next slide. Something to think about. And maybe it's different for your environment because you have a slightly smaller place, or maybe you're even larger. Think about how many people it takes to put together that meal order, from the way the order is taken to the way the order is cooked and assembled and plated and delivered and all of that. It takes a whole lot of people to do that. So we need to make sure that we put our best foot forward every single time. Because as I said before, we don't know when that meal is as that first meal and making that first impression. Next slide. So these are the goals of our program, and I won't read them off. You can see that for yourselves. But the idea is that when we get all of these curveballs, and there's multiple entree orders, and in some cases people don't think of an item as an entree. And so a good example is macaroni and cheese. In some cases it's an entree, in some cases it's a side. Well, when the patient's ordering it, what is it? And again, it's putting it into the context of what the overall order is. And so we wanted to come up with a standardized way to streamline it so we're not doing multiple trays unless it's necessary, and that we have some functional limits built into that. Next slide. So this is our tray. Probably need to have the entree spin around at the bottom at 6 o'clock. But again, we have a precise way to, in fact, put everything on the tray, whether it's exactly how it's. Yes?
Dan, it's hard to hear you. Some people are saying it's hard to hear you. So is it possible? Thank you.
Is that a little bit better? Thank you. So I apologize. So again, the fact that the labels are up, the fact that the patient can read everything is facing towards the patient, is important. Next slide.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, there it is.
The fact that we're actually giving thought to where cold items are being placed relative to items on the tray that generate heat. So if we want that hot food hot, but cold food cold, well, everything's mostly under a dome, but how can we do the cold foods and make sure that they are there, and how can we separate those temperatures? So we've defined that, everything, in terms of how we hold the domes, whether they're in the kitchen, where the items are to be placed, trying to keep the cold foods all next to each other so they don't pick up heat from the other items that are on the tray. Next slide. Again, we won't go into a lot of the detail, but the fact that there are maximums that we can, in fact, put on a tray, and that we're trying to use different things in terms of height. Items that might spread all over the plate and make things not look so great. We believe a lot in trying to use ramekins and casserole dishes, and while it's a little bit more work and a little bit more cost because of the extra dishes, it balances itself out with just sort of the contrasts and heights across the food. So again, having the ways to elevate the foods literally, we think is very important. Next slide.
Going the wrong way. 1 second. Okay.
So again, some specific examples. Again, I won't read to it, but the fact that we've said that there's nothing else that's going under the plate for a pizza. We serve a personal style pizza, so there isn't any conflict with it. The fact that we have items that may be wrapped, in this case, are tacos. One of them has a sticker, one doesn't. That's how we're differentiating one that's a vegetarian item and one that is not. And everything has sort of a rule and a rhyme or a reason. Next slide. Particularly a lot of times we focus on sort of solid foods, but we also want to make sure that we're doing taking that same care with pureed, and we've provide sort of a picture of what a mishmash one would look like on the small side, and what it would look like when we are plating our purees a little bit. We serve dim sum on our menus, and so how many can we put on an order? And so this deck, while it has a lot of detail, and I'm glossing over some of it, this is literally what we're showing to our team members to kind of give them guidance for all those different types of scenarios that might be experienced when those orders and that ticket comes out and is printed in the kitchen. Next slide. A lot of times, again, I've talked about the using that height. Again, look at the difference in visual appeal when you have that macaroni and cheese that doesn't spread all over the plate and it's in a casserole dish. Same thing with the spaghetti and meat sauce. The idea that there's separate foods. In some cases, you think that maybe the patient is ordering it just for themselves, and in many cases we know that they're not. So by keeping the food separate, it allows it, particularly for us, we have a children's hospital. Sometimes eating that little dish is a little bit more of a pleasurable experience for a child than having to deal with an entire plate food. So again, spelling it out that things are shingled, things are plated, using height whenever possible. Next slide. A lot of times we're trying to do different things with our cold foods. We are trying hard, although you see some things with saran on there, some of that's out of necessity, but we are trying to do things, again, have that height, more visual appeal, keeping the cold foods separated off. And in some cases, our hard-boiled eggs are hot. In some cases, they're cold. So we can do the cold ones, in fact, on the sides. Again, spelling out the fact that we opted to shingle it and do it reversed like this. Other people might choose to do it differently, and they might stack them and shingle them. But this is how we've actually opted to do our plates. We get a lot of orders for avocado, and so this is what we're doing for that. Next slide. Again, little other scenarios that you have people ordering things either as condiments. So do you want the condiments actually under the dough? We've opted to not do that, and that's why we have everything separate in the case of the burger on the lower left. And look at the difference in appeal when you can shingle it. You've got some height, and there it has the nice visual appeal. But you also see that we've spelled out the maximum number of side items there. So it makes it easier, and then that also sort of guides us to say, this is too much food. Patients are trying to maximize that. Unfortunately, many times they're not paying for it because it's built into the hospital bill. But these guidelines go the same, whether it's for a patient meal or in fact a guest meal where we're recovering some revenue. Next slide. Little things like condiments, trying to make them have a little bit more, whether it's doilies or using a swirl dish. Again, this is not rocket science. Many of you are already doing that. Again, the purpose of my part of the presentation is to say, here are some ways and some visual tools. We took all these pictures ourselves. We did them with an iPhone, didn't have a fancy camera, and we're actually able to make that look good and turn it into a teachable tool. Next slide. We get a lot of requests for the side items that I mentioned. Same standards, basically, in terms of things are facing the customer, the labels are up, and there is a precise methodology to exactly how we want every single item on the plate. Next slide. Well, I already talked a little bit about ramekins, even having a maximum number of ramekins underneath that and really spelling out, when to use the ramekins and when we're not is helpful. Again, our teams need this level of detail in making the decisions. In the absence of that detail, in our experience with our team at least, we find that they sort of make it up as they go along or do what the best thing is. So by paying a lot of attention to exactly how your patients, your customers are making their meal orders, you can put together guidance that makes the most sense and resonates to your team. I think it also says a lot to show your tray as opposed to having to get images from somewhere else. So it's worth every single penny and time to take your pictures and show your process to getting your customers to plating it the way that you want it to. Next slide. Silverware standards, again, we've spelled it out for every single kind of tray, whether it's a general tray, whether it's a cold beverage tray, whether it's a clear liquid tray. Try to give our team nice visual examples of that. You can see from our tray, we've opted to go without a mat. This is a non-skid tray. That's worked very well for us. It also keeps some of our waste down, particularly on the paper side, as well as a little bit of our cost. But again, every single variation of the tray, I haven't seen too many people take the same care on a clear liquid as they may other trays. So this is one way that you might be able to do it. Next slide.
Oh. The internet, there it is.
A lot of, again, our issues and challenges have been, when does it count as one item and how does that comply to our limits? Because we did find people sort of taking advantage of doing the room service order. So by spelling out what counts as an item and what doesn't, we've provided guidance to people as well as what can go under the dome and what can't. So this is sort of a way to do that, particularly for a breakfast item. Next slide. And then
getting some questions
people,
about, Dan, I'm getting some questions about the domes, but I'll come back to the end about, I had questions for Atul and also, but since we're on the dome, I got a question about the domes because I see that people have a lot of patients. What they were saying is that want more than one entree and they couldn't fit 2 entrees under the dome. You obviously solved that problem by taking ramekins and putting the portion size in a ramekin, which goes under the dome.
So I think understanding that, and a lot of that starts in the call center. So I go back to my mac and cheese example. That person is the one taking the order, and so they would know if that was intended to be a side item or it is intended to be, an entree. And so we actually code things differently into our back-end system so that when it prints on the tray ticket, it's very clear for people as to when it counts as an entree and when it counts as a side item. So we avoid some of that confusion. So I can't stress enough that the standards comes with at the time of order, particularly if you're using a call center or you're doing bedside menu entry, whatever your methodology for capturing it. If you have the opportunity to do some back and forth, setting the standard starts there. And then a lot of what we've shown is how it translates into practice into the kitchen. So again, we give some examples of how we're able to fit and comply with that number in terms of 4 items. You guys might have different standards for that, but this is how we actually literally help people visually do that. In my experience, food service team members, whether they're chefs or food service workers, are very visual people. So the more that you can make it visual, the better it is. Next slide. And some other examples of counting, and that standard carries through, whether it's a breakfast. You can also see that, kind of a really gray area in terms of multiple orders of fries and how, in fact, we have gone in and counted that. And unfortunately, a lot of this has been done by trial and error. So we actually have provided these types of tools and standards. We tried hard to have the same standard at a breakfast compared to a lunch and dinner. Next slide. Just some other examples of the types of entree items, sometimes the things that get us in trouble. In terms of, you've got the one on the lower right, which is a hot dog and 2 burritos. Is that counted as 2 entrees or not? The question is whether or not it fits under the dome. We're trying to make everything fit under the dome as much as possible and be reasonable without putting our call center, our bedside people in a position to sort of be food police, but also having some clarity of standards. So when someone does order too much, we can actually coach them through doing that right now. Next slide. Some things that we put outside the dome, we actually took, we have visuals of all those types of things there. And again, we tried to leave nothing to chance in terms of what was considered an entree and what's considered a side item. So we took pictures literally of what we're serving to show that to our team members. Next slide. So for as much as you worry about what goes under the dome, a lot of times you worry about what goes on the side too. So we have a 6-item limit in terms of what is, and then we have some items that count as 2. So a side salad where it's a Caesar, a Mediterranean, or a garden salad, because of the physical size of that, we actually have some limits placed on this. And I know it seems very tedious, but again, with lots of practice, lots of coaching, our team has been able to operationalize this, and then we've been able to make adjustments to this training deck as we kind of go up with the new situations that perhaps the original training didn't consider. So next slide. So the first slide was very detail oriented, but then here's the one that makes it pop for the team members, because you can literally show them how we're counting, and then we can audit to the standard as well. So we can say, as we have the standard, this is something that we can make sure that is actually happening each and every day, and go on from there. Next slide. So we've got the 4-item standard under the dome. We have the 6-item standard on the tray. The fact that we're not stacking, sometimes we had team members doing that. Everything is neat and has sort of that mise en place, everything in its place type approach to plating with pride. Next slide. We again, as I said, we have the same functional limits for our guest meals as for our main things. We've opted to go with a flat price for our guest meal. We think that's a very reasonable price. We do the same price for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But again, so that there's not one set of standards for doing it for guest meals compared to how you're doing it for there. And as I mentioned before, doing it in the call center is sort of the first key to success, in addition to having the standards in the first place. Next slide.
That's your last slide.
And that is my last slide. So I know I went through this very quickly, but the whole idea is having some standards actually is helpful, and perhaps at least the way that we've done at UCSF gives you guys some ideas and examples of how you might be able to do it in your own facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. And I have some questions for both of you. So thank you, Dan and Atul. Atul, a couple of questions that came up is, how do you know we see the plating, we see the visual, we see the senses, the smell, the taste, the aroma, and obviously using these components that Dan said, and not more than certain amounts under the tray. So I'm gonna give two questions. Dan, how do you, with the aroma, if you have several entrees under the dome, how does it conflict? And Atul can add to that too. And then I'm gonna give you a question, Atul.
So I think, unfortunately, sometimes it does conflict. We're trying to remind the patients that we do have a 6-tray limit for the day, but in fact they can order 6 meals. So we want them to be creative, encourage, maybe try some foods that they don't normally, but remember that they can always call back and order something else if for whatever reason they don't care for it, or just want a little bit more something to eat.
Okay. Atul?
So again, exactly to Dan's point, I was just going to say or add that yes, there would be a conflict of aromas. If, for example, I'll just hypothetical, somebody orders a quesadilla which has some seasoned chicken in it, or some seasoned vegetables with sazon and cumin as a predominant flavor. On the side, you've got some dumplings, Asian, be it shrimp, be it pork, chicken, whatever it is. Two very different aromas over there, but under the same plate. The sides for that, one has salsa and guacamole, and the other one has soy sauce or something to that effect. You can't avoid that. Again, Dan has set certain guidelines, very stringent, very impressive guidelines for his call center, for his staff. You know how many trays you can get, you know how much goes inside the plate, under the dome, as he says, but you can set your own standards for your own operation. And piggybacking off of Dan's advice here, training, first setting the standard and training and reinforcing all of that is going to be key to your success.
So a question, somebody asked what sous vide, what kind of sous vide are you going to be doing? And can you define sous vide?
Sous vide, literal translation for the French term sous vide, is cooking inside, cooking under actually. But what that means is cooking inside a vacuum sealed bag. So for example, you can take any protein, vegetables, pretty much anything. Nowadays, you have chefs doing pastry cream, all the ingredients, put some egg, sugar, vanilla bean, and there's a certain temperature and a time for it. Put it inside a water bath and let the water go, and you get pastry cream. So let me put it in simple layman's terms instead of pastry cream terms. I want to sous vide chicken. First, why am I sous viding chicken? So that it doesn't get dry over a period of time. It's juicy, moist, and the shrink is minimal. We cook chicken in our kitchen at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. When I joined this operation a few months ago, the chicken, all my ovens were set at 400 degrees. Why? Just because. Well, it took me almost 45 days to change that habit over here. Even now, I find ovens at 400 degrees. You cook a 5-ounce or a 7-ounce breast at 300 or 325 versus 400, and you see the shrink. There's loss through dehydration in that convection oven that we use. In sous vide, you're cooking at an even lower temperature for a longer time and a very even cooking process, because the way sous vide works is you would take that piece of chicken, be it grill marked, be it just raw marinated, be it unmarinated, just a piece of straight up chicken, put it inside think of it like a Ziploc bag, vacuum seal it, put it in a water bath that is maintained at a certain temperature. And I'll come to temperatures in a second. There is a circulator which circulates the water in the water bath at a certain temperature that you've set, and the product starts cooking, be it vegetable, chicken, like I said, anything. After, let's say, 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever the time case may be, the product is cooked to 165, or in case of pork and beef and other meats, their internal temperature. And at that point, you can use the product. You can also hold the chicken at 165 without it going higher or lower. And what happens with that is you are in the health code. There's no HACCP violation. So the inspectors are not going to ding you. Joint Commission is not going to say anything to you. And you can serve that cryovac chicken to your guest with maximum flavor and the best possible integrity of the dish. As for temperatures, temperature of the cooking temperature and the sous vide, there are many guides online. And when you buy a sous vide machine or a circulator, actually, the manufacturer should give you some kind of a guideline.
So again, that's knowing the right technique or what you're doing can enhance the texture, can enhance the aroma, can enhance the taste. So how do you know the right technique? Your executive chef should be the one to guide you. Should it be the equipment manufacturers? How do you know that?
Well, first I would go to my exec chef. Many people don't have exec chefs, and that's when you go to equipment manufacturers. But be careful with manufacturers. You don't want the manufacturer to tell you how to run your operation. Unfortunately, if you don't have a chef, you need to do your own research or use your peers and find out, okay, what should I do? Should I boil my beef and roast my chicken, or should I boil my chicken and roast my beef? You need to figure that piece out. And then again, forums like this.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And so one question for both of you. One of the things they said is most of your trays were beautiful, and I see the aromas and I see the colors of your trays. That I think has to be planned, and those visual things you're saying. How long does that take, that process, to get to where? Well, Dan, how long did it take you to get to that process?
Well, I think we didn't start from scratch. So it took us about 3 months to sort of put together the training and crystallize all the little gaps that we saw that was leading to inconsistency. And again, it's hard to plan exactly what a patient's going to order. So it just took thought and planning to put it together to do that, and then figure out who was doing what, particularly since we rolled it out at multiple sites.
Okay.
If you have, again, our menu is a little bit on the large side, so if you have a smaller menu, certainly that would do that. If you have a comfort level in taking pictures and putting together things, but again, it needs to be a team effort. It's the chefs, it's the call center, it's the diet office, it's the people delivering the meals. All of that needs to be put together.
Can I just interrupt here? Dan just mentioned taking pictures and being comfortable with that. You don't need to be comfortable with taking pictures. You just need to take pictures, period. Pictures talk more than words. You put the picture, print the picture out, and put it in that plastic folder and put it either in a binder or put it, on a bulletin board in that operational area, be it wherever you're picking up trays from or where your food is being produced. That picture is going to tell people the portion size and what they're serving and how they're serving it. So pictures are becoming inevitable. Not becoming, they've always been.
I would agree, and I would
ahead.
say that I would rather have a picture with not great lighting or whatever, but it's a picture of my stuff from my team,
Exactly.
and I think that says a lot. So I would agree with Atul. Don't most everybody feels comfortable with it. Don't let that hold you back. Better, it's so easy to take it and redo it. You know, just get something out there and show people.
You know, it's interesting what you say, because, you know, we talk about plating, we talk about smell, we talk about color, and these seem fundamental to most of us. Easier said than done sometimes. But I guess my question to you is, if you were going to get started, just start taking pictures of what you're doing now and how you can improve those. Would you say that's a way to get started? Look what you're doing, see how you can tweak it, how you can test it?
Yes, no question.
Yes.
So
And it doesn't have to be a perfect picture.
So if you had to give one final words of philosophy or words of wisdom, each of you, what would you say to close up today?
Just do it visually. Just do it visually. I don't just start somewhere, and again, solve a problem. And I think that resonates more than anything. We did this because we were solving a problem of having too many food items ordered, the trays looking, and the staff being frustrated about when I should put something on it and where. And so we helped solve the problem, and that helped a lot in getting their buy-in.
Thank you.
I would say, as a chef, I would use the first time I'm going to come up with this passion, and this piggybacking off of Dan's thoughts here. I tell my team, I'm a problem creator, but I create problems to solve problems, not just leave them hanging. So become a solution provider.
Okay. So hope you enjoyed. I hope you walked away with some ideas on how you can increase patient satisfaction, the patient experience, elevate it by looking at your taste, looking at the quality, looking at the plating, culinary teams, reaching out to people like Atul from as an executive chef, reaching out to Dan and asking them the questions. We're all in this together to elevate the experience, because if one hospital looks great or one senior facility looks great, we all look great. And again, that whole visual of that tray, if you have everything on it, it doesn't look good. If you have you want a blending of taste, but you don't want to overwhelm taste, because again, the key to this is nourishment and hydration. And if you overwhelm someone with a taste, a flavor, a color, or the lack of, you won't get what you're trying to achieve in your facilities. So thank you for joining us today, Dan and Atul. Thank you for sharing it. And everyone who's participated, thank you. There's a post questionnaire. Please fill it out, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.